101.5 FM. Also, welcome to our members of the media who are in attendance. I am Melissa Griffith Belgrave, and I will serve as your Master of Ceremonies for today's press conference. Today's press conference is being put on by the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee to update the media, and by extension, the wider public, on the findings of 4 reports of the committee, namely, the 7th report of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee of the 11th Parliament on the examination of the audited accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements of the Estate Management and Business Development Company Limited for the financial years 2008-2010. The 9th report of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee of the 11th Parliament on the examination of the audited accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements of the Telecommunications Services of Trinidad and Tobago Limited, TSTT, for the financial years 2008 to 2016. The 10th report of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee on the examination of the audited accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements of the National Entrepreneurship Development Company Limited, NEDCO, for the financial years 2008 to 2014. Also, the 11th report of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee on the examination of the audited accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements of the National Maintenance, Training, and Security Company Limited, MTS, for the financial years 2008 to 2016. Just before we proceed to the chairman of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee, let me introduce the members of the committee present. Flanked to the center would be the chairman of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee, Mr. Wade Mark, and seated on his right would be Mr. David Small. I would now like to hand over to the chairman of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee, Mr. Wade Mark.
Thank you very much, Melissa, and good afternoon to the media and my colleagues. The Honorable Jennifer Baptiste Primus will join us very shortly, but I want to welcome Senator David Small, as well as the listening public. I am Mr. Wade Mark, Senator and Chairman of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee. During the second session of the 11th Parliament, the committee conducted 8 public inquiries and 3 inquiries during the third session. Of these examinations, the PAEC will highlight the issues and recommendations found in the audited financial statements of the Estate Management and Business Development Company Limited, the EMBD, the telecommunication services of Trinidad and Tobago, the National Entrepreneurship Development Company, NEDCO, and the National Maintenance, Training, and Security Company Limited, MTS. Now, I'd like to share with you 2 of the key inquiry objectives thus far. 1, to ensure that the policies of these state enterprises are carried out efficiently, effectively, and economically, and whether expenditure conforms to the authority which governs it. 2, to ensure that the audited accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements of the state enterprises conform to the authority which governs them. Based on the evidence gathered, the committee identified the major trends across state enterprises, including 1, the late submission of audited financial statements to Parliament. 2, the lack of approved strategic plans. 3, the lack of effective oversight and supervision by the respective line ministries and investment divisions of the Ministry of Finance, and also the late submission of audited financial statement to the Parliament. In that particular regard, we recommended the following. 1, state enterprises should adhere to the stipulated deadlines set out in Section 3.1 of the State Enterprises Performance Monitoring Manual, which states that audited financial statements must be submitted to Parliament within 4 months after a company's end of the year and within 2 months of the mid-year date, subject to the approval of the Minister of Finance. And secondly, the Ministry of Finance Investments Division should strengthen its overall capacity and take a more proactive role in monitoring and evaluating the organization's operations, that is, state enterprises operations. The second aspect of our recommendations dealt with the lack of approved strategic plan. The PAEC recommended the following: state enterprises should adhere to the stipulated deadlines set out in Section 3.2 of the State Enterprises Performance Monitoring Manual, which states that companies are required to submit their strategic plans to both the Investments Division and the respective line ministry at least 6 months prior to the start of the implementation period of the plan, for those receiving subventions to allow for national budgetary preparation activities, and 1 month for others. And also the Investments Division and the respective line ministry should hold discussions with the respective state enterprises to ensure that the strategic plans are specific, measurable, feasible, and realistic, and conform to the policy of the organization, and thereafter make every effort to have the draft strategic plan approved within the stipulated deadline as outlined. The committee major issue, one of the major issues, I would say, identified by this committee across the state enterprises was the lack of effective supervision by the line ministry and investments division of the Ministry of Finance. We therefore recommended that the line ministry and the Ministry of Finance Investments Division should exercise strong oversight functions through collaboration and liaison with the state enterprises and provide the committee with details of the progress in identifying and addressing the weakness of respective state enterprises under its purview commencing January 30th, 2018. The line ministry and the Ministry of Finance Investments Division should hold discussions with all state enterprises semi-annually to assess the progress made and the way forward. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, these are some of our findings, and we want to take this opportunity to express our gratitude to all stakeholders that provided both oral and written evidence to the committee. Members of the media, I will now invite any information as it relates to clarification on our report. Mindful of the fact that we have to resume at 5 p.m. and I am on my legs. If 5 to 5 arrives and we are yet to conclude, I'll ask Mr. Small and Mrs. Batiste to continue because I have to conclude my contribution.
Just before you all start, members of the media, we ask that you put on the microphones as well as you state your name and the media house that you belong to as well. Thank you.
Sasha Harry Nanan from Newsday. We haven't gotten to go through in detail the report, so we're just asking. But in terms of the need for more involvement and more, I guess, oversight of these various enterprises, what do you think will actually take place now? Because it's not the first time the PAECs and even JSCs have complained about the lack of timely reporting by state enterprises. What will actually make it different this time?
I'll ask the Honourable Minister Jennifer Batiste to respond.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, members of the media. In terms of ensuring that state enterprises meet the criteria as laid down in the State Enterprises Performance Manual, Monitoring Manual. This government, through the Honorable Prime Minister, instructed the Minister of Finance to communicate with all state enterprises, directing them that they must adhere to the time frame involved. Line ministries also have the responsibility of writing to those state enterprises and advising them of the time frame and encouraging them to keep those timelines. The Honorable Prime Minister met with all the chairmen of state enterprises sometime last year and did indicate if state enterprises chairmen and boards do not adhere, then their composition on those boards will be reviewed. So that we are very clear, because even sitting at the level of this Public Accounts Enterprises Committee, I mean, we are considering reports from 2008 to 2011, very historical in nature, so that we have to get state enterprises to address that backlog and bring their accounting up to date.
Good afternoon, Kim Bodram from The Express. As my colleague said, I too have not seen the report or studied it. Also, I did come in a bit late, so forgive me. But, you know, I've been covering these things for years, and so what I've seen is that, I'm sorry, boards change regularly. You know, so you may have had nonsense done by a previous board, by a previous chairman, and then a different board or a different chairman is appearing before a PAEC or JSC. And as you said, Minister, sometimes you'll find yourself considering things from a decade ago. So, I mean, you know, how is accountability really going to be upgraded to deal with things done in the past that may have been unacceptable and prevent it in the future?
It's small to respond to you, Kim.
I'm sorry.
No problem. If you want some water, we can supply you.
Good afternoon to the listening and viewing audience and the members of the media here. This is a fundamental challenge that we face in Trinidad and Tobago, the issue of accountability for state resources. And I think that one of the ways of doing that is starting to apply penalties. I think that the Honourable Minister on our left here indicated that one of the things that has been outlined by the current administration is that boards will be reviewed if they are not falling in line with the requirements of the Public Service Performance Monitoring Manual. But we have to go deeper than that. I think that when people are in charge of state resources, if you look at one of the entities that we've just laid a report on, EMBD, you will see that over a period, EMBD had no internal audit function. They had no procurement unit. And then they had no financial audited financials for several years. And what was the result? You ended up with a company that is supposed to be developing residential and agricultural, but spending $400 million building roads. So that when you allow the systems that are in place to degrade, then you find these types of things happening. And then further to that, they have like $2 billion in trade payables. But if you don't have a procurement unit, how did you arrive at these payables? And these are the things that require people to answer hard questions. If it means calling back former members of boards of directors and holding people to account, conducting necessary investigations. The committee could only go so far in terms of trying to elicit from the current holders of office exactly what happened, and then in terms of what are you going to do to fix it going forward. As for what has transpired in the past, the committee only has so much authority. But I think that it doesn't mean that if it doesn't come to us that it can't be treated with. It's above our pay grade, I would admit. But I think there's enough information coming through these committees that some of these actions that have been taken border on the line of fraud and at least require an investigation. And that is the view that we've seen. And the systemic problems, the chairman was very clear. Almost every entity that we've come across, there's a problem of oversight from the Ministry of Finance Investments Division. And I don't blame the people working there. I think the issue is there's just not enough of them. And that needs to be fixed. And if I had anything to say, it would be fixed urgently. They need to be thoroughly beefed up, probably double or tripling staff, and give them some enforcement by having the current performance monitoring manual become a legal document, have it enforceable. As it is now, it's a nice document, and people are told to adhere to it, but there's no legal requirement to adhere to it. One of the things we would be pushing for is to try to make sure that they adhere to it. Thank you.
As an addendum to what my colleague, Senator Small, just said, in several instances, in interfacing with many of these state enterprises, they have moved away from their core mandate and engaging in activities not consistent with their original mandate. So in many cases, our recommendations are to ensure that they realign themselves. Secondly, it's not all gloom and doom. We have had the very good fortune of interviewing certain state enterprises, which are success stories. For example, MTS. When you look at their historical accounts, there appear to be a problem, but when you look at where they are up to date, MTS reflects as a success story, submitting their accounts are up to date. Unlike, for example, the last state enterprise that we interface with, and that is the National Training Agency, which this committee agreed that we will recall that agency back before this committee, I think before the end of February, Chairman? Yes. Thank you.
If you may allow me, because I have to leave, and as I said, I'll ask my colleagues to continue. I just wanted to bring to the attention of the media a situation which we would like to have the country address, and of course the Parliament. And that has to do with the decision by TSTT to acquire assets amounting to $255 million of Massey Communication, which did not have cabinet approval, which is contrary to Section 2.2 of the State Enterprises Performance Manual. And we made a strong recommendation to the Parliament that the Ministry of Public Utilities as line ministry should be aware of its role in the acquisition of major investments as indicated in Section 3.1.14 of the State Enterprise Performance Monitoring Manual, which states state enterprises or their subsidiaries are required to obtain prior approval of the Minister of Finance for the acquisition of significant assets, new investments in non-government securities, the incurrence of new additional long-term debt, and entering into significant contracts relative to the company. In addition, going forward, the line ministry should ensure that all major investments are approved before any large investments are made. And the second point we want to make here is TSTT accountability to the Parliament. We made it very clear that we wanted to get clarification on a due diligence conducted by TSTT the recent acquisition. However, the company's official expressed an unwillingness to respond to the questions and due diligence report posed by the PAEC and subsequently agreed to submit the responses in writing. Now, though the request by the committee to receive the information was fulfilled, the responses submitted were vague and lacked pertinent information. Therefore, we have recommended the following. The Ministry of Finance as corporation sole must ensure that persons appointed to serve on boards of state enterprises be made aware of their responsibilities to account to Parliament for public funds. These are very strong recommendations that we have made, and members of the media, I would like, with your permission, to be excused and ask my two colleagues to remain, because I have 9 minutes to wrap up my contribution, and they will deal with any additional question. So if you will forgive me, I have to run back to the chamber, and my colleagues will take over. Okay? Jenny?
Unfortunately, we have to go back in at 4:58, so we would have to wrap up the questioning period right now.
Follow up to what Mr. Small said about making the manual a legal document. What is the timeline to actually get that done?
There's no timeline at present. We have been advocating for it. The Public Enterprises, the Public Account Enterprises Committee has seen a pattern where the entities, many of the entities claim that they understand what is required inside the manual, but they don't act in that same way. And the issue is in any situation where people have rules, but the rules, they can sidestep the rules or avoid the rules. What we're seeing happen is that they're doing exactly that. They're sidestepping and avoiding the rules because there's no penalty being applied. All we're saying is that in order for this to work, it must be binding upon them, and it must have some sort of penalty for non-compliance. And in order to move that requires action in another pay grade in terms of saying, listen, this has been a manual that spent a lot of effort went into it. It's a really good, probably needs updating in 1 or 2 areas, but the core of the document represents a comprehensive policy framework for the management and operation of state enterprises. And it is my personal belief that it is something that should be put in a place where state enterprises have no wiggle room around their level of compliance to that document.
Further to what Senator Small has said, I am aware that the Honorable Minister of Finance coming into office met an investment unit that was grossly understaffed, and he has taken steps to increase the human resource capacity within that unit so that the oversight role of the ministry through that unit would be enhanced.